Take a look at your closest friends. One just bought a house, another drives a newer car. Someone else is posting photos from a vacation you can't afford. One friend got promoted, another started a business, and without even realizing it, a thought begins to form. Why does everyone seem to have more money than me? It's one of the most common financial questions people ask themselves. And according to decades of research in psychology, economics, and sociology, the answer is surprisingly strange. Because in many cases, your friends don't actually have more money than you. Your brain simply makes it feel that way. Today, we're going to investigate why. And by the end of this video, you may discover that the financial game you've been playing was impossible to win from the start. The story begins in 1954. A social psychologist named Leon Festinger proposed an idea that would completely change how researchers understand human behavior. He called it social comparison theory. The idea was simple. Human beings don't evaluate themselves in isolation. We evaluate ourselves relative to other people. In other words, you don't know whether you're rich, successful, attractive, intelligent, or accomplished by looking at yourself. You decide those things by looking around. Imagine earning $70,000 a year. In one neighborhood, that income might place you among the wealthiest people around you. In another neighborhood, it might place you below average. The amount of money is identical, but the feeling is completely different. This reveals something important. The human brain was not designed to measure wealth objectively. It was designed to measure status. And status only exists in comparison to others. This explains a strange phenomenon. Many people become financially successful and still feel behind. Not because they lack money, but because the people around them have even more. And that brings us to the first major twist in our investigation. What if your friends actually are richer than you? Not because you're doing something wrong, but because mathematics almost guarantees it. In 1991, sociologist Scott Feld published a paper describing something now known as the friendship paradox. The finding sounds impossible at first. On average, most people have fewer friends than their friends do. Read that again. Most people are less connected than their own friends. How can that be true? Imagine a school. A few students are extremely popular and have hundreds of connections. Most students have far fewer. Because popular people appear in so many friendship networks, they're overrepresented in everyone's social circle. As a result, the average friend is more popular than the average person. It's not a psychological illusion, it's mathematics. And researchers later discovered that similar effects appear in income, education, influence, and professional success. The people you notice most are often the people who are doing better than average, which means your social environment may systematically expose you to unusually successful individuals. Suddenly, your perception becomes distorted. You aren't comparing yourself to the average person, you're comparing yourself to the most visible people. And that's a very different benchmark. Now let's make the problem even worse. Because modern technology has amplified this effect to a level that no previous generation experienced. 100 years ago, most people compared themselves to a relatively small group: neighbors, co-workers, friends, family. Today, your comparison group includes millions of people. Every day, social media exposes you to carefully selected moments from other people's lives. The promotion, the new house, the engagement, the luxury vacation, the successful business launch, the investment gains. What you rarely see are the missed opportunities, the credit card debt, the anxiety, the failed projects, the financial mistakes. Researchers studying social media repeatedly find a relationship between heavy comparison behavior and lower subjective well-being. The reason is simple. You are comparing your full reality to somebody else's highlight reel. And no matter how successful you become, that comparison is almost impossible to win. But here's where the story becomes even more interesting. The feeling that your friends have more money than you might be older than human civilization itself. In a famous experiment conducted by primatologist Frans de Waal, 2 capuchin monkeys were asked to perform the same task. One monkey received a cucumber, the other received a grape. The grape was considered far more valuable. At first, Both monkeys were willing to work, but the moment the cucumber-receiving monkey saw the other getting grapes for the exact same effort, everything changed. The monkey became visibly frustrated. It rejected the cucumber. Sometimes it even threw it back at the researchers. What changed? Not the reward. The cucumber was exactly the same. Only the comparison changed. Researchers have repeatedly found similar patterns in humans. We care deeply about absolute outcomes, but we care even more about relative outcomes. In other words, earning $70,000 feels very different when your friends earn $50,000 than when they earn $200,000. The money hasn't changed, the comparison has, and your brain treats that difference as if it were reality itself. This may explain why financial dissatisfaction often survives even dramatic increases in income. You're not measuring your situation, you're measuring your position, and those are not the same thing. But the story doesn't end there, because your richest friend may have far more influence on your happiness than all your other friends combined. Imagine 5 people earning $60,000 a year. Then add one friend earning $300,000. Objectively, that person is an outlier. But psychologically, they often become the reference point. Humans are naturally drawn toward exceptional examples. The extraordinary stands out. The average fades into the background. This creates a dangerous illusion. You begin to treat rare outcomes as normal outcomes. The successful entrepreneur becomes the benchmark. The high-earning executive becomes the benchmark. The friend who bought a house at 30 becomes the benchmark. And slowly, your perception of reality shifts. Without realizing it, you've stopped comparing yourself to most people. You've started comparing yourself to the exceptions. Economists sometimes describe this as a problem of relative income. Research consistently shows that people care not only about how much they earn, but also about how much they earn relative to the people around them. In many cases, a person's satisfaction depends more on relative position than absolute income, which means something remarkable can happen. Your income can double. Your lifestyle can improve dramatically. Your financial security can increase. And yet, your sense of success barely changes. Why? Because your comparison group changed too. The moment you move up, you begin comparing yourself to an entirely new set of people. The finish line moves, and the chase begins again. At this point, you might think the solution is simple. Stop comparing yourself to other people. But the research suggests something more complicated. Because your social circle doesn't only influence how wealthy you feel, it may influence how wealthy you eventually become. Economist Raj Chetty and his team spent years studying economic mobility using data from millions of individuals. One of their most surprising findings involved something called economic connectedness. People who had friendships across different income groups were more likely to experience upward economic mobility later in life. This creates a fascinating paradox. Your friends can make you feel poorer, but they can also increase your chances of becoming wealthier. The same people who trigger comparison may also expose you to new opportunities, careers, skills, and networks. So the goal isn't necessarily to avoid successful people. The goal is to understand the psychological cost of comparing yourself to them. Because comparison and opportunity often arrive together. And then we encounter another problem. Most people are surprisingly bad at identifying who is actually wealthy. In the 1990s, researchers Thomas Stanley and William Danko studied American millionaires and published their findings in The Millionaire Next Door. Their conclusions challenged almost every stereotype about wealth. Many millionaires lived in ordinary neighborhoods, drove ordinary cars, and spent far less than people expected. Meanwhile, many people who appeared wealthy were carrying enormous amounts of debt. This creates another distortion. Your brain often uses visible consumption as a shortcut for measuring wealth. But consumption and wealth are not the same thing. A luxury car may signal wealth, or it may signal a loan. A large house may signal financial freedom or financial stress. An expensive watch may represent investment success or a maxed-out credit card. The truth is, that genuine wealth is often invisible, which means the people you're comparing yourself to may not be as wealthy as they appear, and the people who are truly wealthy may not appear wealthy at all. Now consider a thought experiment. Imagine that tomorrow you suddenly earn exactly as much money as the richest person in your friend group. Would you finally feel successful? Would the comparison stop? Research suggests probably not, because within a surprisingly short period of time, your brain would simply select a new comparison target. Perhaps someone in another city, another company, another industry, another social circle. The benchmark would move, and the process would begin again. This is one of the reasons status is such a difficult game to win. Unlike wealth, status has no objective finish line. There is always someone ahead, someone richer, someone smarter, someone more successful, someone more accomplished. The ladder extends indefinitely, and every step upward reveals another step above it. This is also why so many people never feel rich. Even millionaires often report feeling financially average, not because they lack money, but because they compare themselves to people who have even more. The game never ends because the rules constantly change. And that's exactly what researchers Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton discovered when studying income and well-being. Beyond a certain point, additional income produces diminishing emotional returns. The excitement fades, the adaptation begins, and what once felt extraordinary becomes normal. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. Humans quickly become accustomed to improvements in their circumstances. The new salary becomes your normal salary. The new car becomes your normal car. The larger home becomes your normal home. Then the comparison starts again. At this point, we arrive at the central question. If comparison is misleading, if social media distorts reality, if visible wealth can be deceptive, and if the finish line keeps moving, then how should we measure financial success? The answer may be simpler than most people think. Not by looking sideways, by looking backward. Compare yourself to who you were 5 years ago. Compare your knowledge, your skills, your savings, your opportunities, your financial habits, because that's the only comparison that remains stable over time. Your friends will always change. Their circumstances will always change. There will always be someone richer, someone smarter, someone more successful, someone luckier, someone ahead of you. The comparison never ends. But progress is different. Progress has a measurable direction, and perhaps that's the biggest lesson hidden inside all this research. The reason your friends seem richer than you isn't necessarily because they are. It's because your brain was never designed to calculate wealth objectively. It was designed to calculate status. And status is a game with no finish line. Maybe the question was wrong from the beginning. Not, why do my friends have more money than me? But, why am I using my friends to measure my life at all? Because once you understand the psychology behind comparison, something becomes obvious. Your friends are not the problem. Social media is not the problem. Success is not the problem. The problem is that the human brain evolved to measure relative status in small tribes. Now, it is trying to do the same thing in a world of billions of people. And that's a game nobody can win. There will always be someone richer than you. There will always be someone poorer than you. There will always be someone ahead of you. The comparison never ends. But progress has a direction, and that's why the most financially successful people often stop asking whether they're richer than their friends. They start asking whether they're richer than the person they were yesterday. Because your friends may have more money than you, or they may not. But either way, comparing yourself to them is unlikely to tell you anything useful. The only comparison that can actually improve your future is the one between who you are today and who you were before.